Good morning, Beeville. This is Cindy Clark from PAC-B TV, and I am here this morning with Bill Brower, the Executive Director of the Pomeroy Foundation. And in case you don't know what the Pomeroy Foundation represents, I'm sure many of you in driving around the community, Lysander, Van Buren, and the village of Baldwinsville, and other areas within the county, the state, you see these markers, these orange, like an orange and blue marker, and if you have time to even look at them with the traffic, they're historical markers. And Mr. Brower is here this morning to kind of give us a little background about what the significance of these markers, how they all got started, and just kind of the story behind them. There's a lot of history there. Good morning, Bill. Thanks for coming and spending some time with us this morning.
Great to be here.
Why don't we just start out with what the mission of the Pomeroy Foundation is, how you got involved, and give us a little story. Give us a little story about the whole deal.
Sure, that sounds like a great place to start. So it starts with Bill Pomeroy. Bill Pomeroy grew up in Binghamton, went to RPI as an undergrad and studied engineering management. Went on to the Wharton School. His first job was with IBM in California, in Northern California. So think early days of Silicon Valley. He sold mainframe computers. He did that for a couple years out there, and then he went to Mexico with his wife. He bought a VW van and he traveled in Mexico. And I think this is important because it gives you a sense of Bill Pomeroy's zest for life and his curiosity. He came back, moved to Syracuse. He started his business in Syracuse in 1978, CX Tech, which is a business that did incredibly well right here in central New York, employed over 300 people. They did a lot of sales in rehabbed and used computer equipment, cables. 95% of the sales were outside of New York State. So think about that economic engine in central New York. The business was recognized numerous times as one of the fastest small and mid-sized companies in the country. Great place to work for, very involved locally, volunteering. Their employees volunteered, they supported local nonprofits. So that's where the business side of it got its start. And then what happens is in 2004, Bill was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia. And he received his treatment at Krause. He was at Krause for over 100 days, 3 different rounds of chemo on 4 South. He and his wife, Sandra, fell in love with the nurses there. He eventually went to Dana-Farber in Boston for a transplant, and they found a really good match for him. And while he was going through all this, Bill made a promise to himself that if he survived, and there was no guarantee of that at the time, it was very touch and go, he would help others in a similar situation. And that's where the foundation got its start. And the primary early focus was to recruit people to be donors, stem cell and bone marrow transplant donors. And Bill learned that people of color were less likely to find good matches. So the focus has been to recruit people of color to be donors. And so that's been going on for over 20 years, and Bill recently had what is called his rebirth day. And so that was the start of the foundation, and we have supported organizations in those spaces for all 20 years and continue to do that. Places that run drives to get donors, places that do research in the space. Bill has also, through the foundation and individually, been very supportive of other nonprofits in central New York. So Krause is at the top of the list. So the Pomeroy College of Nursing at Krause, the Pomeroy Rehab Center on Erie Boulevard on the east side, the Emergency Services Center, the emergency
Right.
room at Krause, and he most recently donated the world headquarters of CX Tech in North Syracuse to Krause to be a wellness and community center. Also think Salvation Army. His father was involved in the Salvation Army. Bill has been involved as a donor. He's getting, and the foundation is getting more involved with the Alzheimer's Association in Central New York. So we're a major donor of their annual walk, which will happen this fall, and also WCNY. So they're the local philanthropies that we're involved in. And part of the reason, Cindy, that I tell you this is philanthropy is personal for Bill Pomeroy. And that brings us to the markers. So when he was a little boy, his dad was a businessman who traveled. And sometimes he brought Bill along with him. And they always stopped at historical markers, and they parked, and they got out of the car, and they read the markers. And Bill developed, tapping into his curiosity, this love of history that has continued for him to this day. When he learned that New York State was no longer funding the marker program, the foundation has stepped in. And since 2006, done 1,200 markers in New York State. So there are markers in every county in New York State. They're the traditional marker you mentioned, so the yellow and blue that people recognize with the outline of the state at the top. And so some of those markers people see driving around are going to be Pomeroy markers. Some are going to be state of New York markers. I think there are 5 in Van Buren, Lysander, and Baldwinsville. We would love ideas for more. We would love to do more up here, and we can talk about some of the programs that we do as we get into the conversation. The foundation's done 2,800 nationwide now, so it's not just in New York. We do markers all over the United States. We have markers in 49 states, the District of Columbia, and we're working really hard to get one in Hawaii.
I never realized that initially that they were outside of our little area here.
Yeah.
I thought this was a localized event, so to speak.
Right.
And then as you start paying attention and you're driving different areas in the county and the state, you start seeing more. And I developed an interest because I thought, what's this all about?
Yeah.
Well, here we are today to find out what this is all
Yeah.
about. So, I understand the background, his inspiration to get going on this, to do this. So how do you get started with something like this? Say somebody is interested in doing something like that. How do they do that?
So if someone here in Baldwinsville and among your viewers was interested in, had an idea for a marker,
Okay.
that's a place to start, to have a good idea, to be interested, to love history. We love history. The people we work with also love history. And so the most obvious program is the New York State program. And so we'll talk about that, and then hopefully we'll get to talk about the other programs we
Okay.
do that people might be interested in and want to know a little more about. So an individual cannot receive directly a grant for a marker, but individuals have great ideas. That's where all the ideas come from. And so one of your viewers has an idea for a marker. Connect with one of the historic societies here
Okay.
in the area, connect with a library, connect with a municipality. So the town of Lysander could apply for a marker. Baldwinsville could, Van Buren could. We've been working with the Liverpool Public Library recently, and they've been working there with students who are homeschooled.
Okay.
And the students came up with ideas for markers, including one for Hydes in Liverpool, which we
Great
have funded.
idea, great idea,
So there's
yeah.
going to be a marker
Yeah.
at Hydes, a New York State marker at Hydes. And so these ideas can come from anyone. And students are especially creative when they learn about
Yes,
the
they are,
opportunity
yeah.
to do this. So the grants have to go to one of those entities. So a 501c3 nonprofit, a municipality, a tribal nation, colleges and universities can apply, museums can apply, but they can get their ideas from individuals.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we have a website, wgpfoundation.org. and the guidelines to apply for a grant are all on the website, and we want to help. So if someone goes onto the website, they have a question, I feel a little stuck, what's the next step, what do I need to do, call us, email us, all that information's on the website.
Oh, okay, well, that's good, that's
Yeah.
good. What are some of the stories that get told with some of these signs? I know
Yeah.
they're historical.
Yeah.
But do you have, how far back do they go as far as like the Revolutionary War?
You bet.
All right, now,
You
what do
bet.
they tell us? I mean,
Yeah, so there's a local one here. It's an Erie Canal marker. And it is in Memphis, which is in the town of Van
Right.
Buren. Memphis originally was Canton. And so in 1890, when plans were drawn out for the Erie Canal, there was not much going on in Canton. And 5 years later, in 1825, when the canal opened, Canton, later Memphis, was starting to thrive as a result of the Erie Canal running through there. So stores, taverns, homes, schools were building up around the Erie Canal, and we have a marker there. And what's significant about it is it's almost at the halfway point between Buffalo and Albany,
yeah.
right? We're right in the middle. And right now, it's on the towpath, which is the state has invested a lot of money in. So you can go on your bike or you can hike from Buffalo to Albany. Not many people do that. They do the little section in their neighborhood, but that marker's out there now in the town of Van Buren in Memphis to tell the story. Every marker also has a web page associated with the Pomeroy Foundation webpage. So we have a marker map that's interactive. You can go on our website, you can zoom in on this area, and you can find all the Pomeroy markers that have been placed in this area. You click on the marker, a website comes up, and it tells a deeper story of the history. So for people who are curious, we have all that on the website.
now what's the website again where they can get this?
The website is wgpfoundation.org.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thanks for asking again.
Well,
Yeah.
as a reminder, if
Yeah.
you're interested, go to this website, because I've gone to it and gotten a lot of information. And what's interesting, that these signs, we're talking about the signs, you're talking about Memphis, because this is the bicentennial for the Erie Canal.
That's
and there's a
right.
lot of history there as well. In fact, we had a gal on not too long ago. She and her husband walked the whole thing. They walked it all, and she told her story.
That's wonderful.
She's into
I'm
history.
going to have to find that one.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's a very good
Yeah.
one, and it was a 5-year journey for her.
Yeah.
But I digress.
No.
Let's get back to the signs here.
So we're storytellers, right? That's
Yes,
where at
yes.
heart
Good,
we're
good.
storytellers,
Yes.
and we want people to tell their stories, and the stories are not our ideas. The ideas come from people in communities all over the country, and we work with them. So we're not telling people what stories to tell. We're listening.
They're listening and
We're helping them tell
Right.
stories in their communities. And we find that when that happens and these markers are dedicated and people come out, they learn more. People who love history, we love history.
Oh, yeah.
We love to work with people
Yeah.
who love history. And politicians come out and proclamations are read, and people learn a lot about where they live that they didn't know before, and that's powerful.
Very powerful.
And it really knits community together in a way that we need. So the markers are more than markers. They're objects that bring people together, that spark curiosity. And our markers, if you go on the website, start to do an application with a nonprofit partner, what you're going to find is that what we need to have are the primary sources. So that marker in Memphis is all based on primary sources. So we went back, the applicants went back, they found newspaper articles that talked about what was going on there. So that's the Pomeroy Foundation's marker gold standard. If you read something on one of our markers, you know it's not opinion. It's historical fact based on primary sources. Some people struggle with that, most love it, because they want their stories to be told in a way when people read the marker, they say, I believe that. I don't have to have any
Well,
questions about that.
That's very important.
It's powerful.
That is very powerful. And it does bring communities together, because I've seen these signs forever and ever and ever. I had a friend who refurbished one completely because it had been, the weathered or whatever. It took him a few years because he was working, but that really sparked my interest. So I see them around, and I know that it tells a story because I've lived here all my life, and I love this community. And now with the growth, there's so many new faces, and everybody needs to know where they're living, the history here, and how it all got started, and why we're here, and what happened here many, many years ago with the canal coming right through the village here many years ago.
Yeah.
So I think everybody, all ages, need to know who we are and why we are. And that's why this is also very, very interesting, and it helps one become aware of all their surroundings and to appreciate where they are and why they're there. I mean, why they can be there. There's so much education involved. And right along education, now, do you have those types of programs, the education programs? Or
I want to say we found a kindred spirit here.
Okay,
in you.
You have, trust me.
That's wonderful. And when you said people of all ages, it made me think of our education program. So we developed a curriculum. It's a 3-week curriculum, and initially targeted to high school students. And the curriculum guides the students and their teachers through a process where they come up with an idea for a marker. They do a letter of intent. That's the first part of the process, to do a grant application, which they send to us, and it begins a conversation. And whether it's a educational grant or a grant from an individual, same process, letter of intent, and it starts a conversation. And then the students do the primary research themselves. So that happens in the classroom. Teachers are guiding them. As I said, in Liverpool, these are homeschooled students who are doing it with the help of the library and applying for markers. They do a grant application. That's a good thing to know how to do for an individual. It's a good thing to put on a college application. It's a good thing to put on a resume that you've applied for and successfully received a grant, because we want to say yes to all these applications. And we help people get to the point where we say yes. Sometimes it takes a little longer. There's a little more back and forth to get the primary sources, but we want to say yes, and we want to help communities get these markers. We especially want to help the students get the markers and put them in the ground, and they plan the dedication ceremonies, and they speak at the dedications. Again, think of that great experience for students. And what's happened is, as more and more educators have learned about this curriculum, it's being modified, and it's being used in middle schools. And this summer, up at Clarkson University, one of their honor students is going to apply for a marker as part of his summer internship program. At the University of South Carolina, in Columbia, South Carolina, they have a great public history master's and PhD program. Those students are now being assigned marker applications as part of their learning, and we are funding markers in South Carolina that those students have applied for. So we think this is growing, it's national. You're going to see more and more teachers incorporate this kind of curriculum into their classrooms. It's perfect for the new New York State requirements in civics and social studies to do a marker in a classroom. I think this is going to blow up. And just what you said, Cindy, think about a student driving around town in a car with a parent, and they pass one of these markers, and they say, I did that. We did that. This is our place. We belong here.
It is certainly a sense of belonging. You're right. It's very powerful. It's wonderful just to feel that sense of pride and belonging in a community, and to know its history, just to talk with people and communicate, and just a regular conversation. And that pride, because I've established from seeing these markers, because I've seen every single one in this area. I hope I've found them all, and spent a half a day going around and looking at them and taking pictures and trying to internalize. I was awed.
Yeah.
I was awed in reading some of these. I just think, when you're standing there taking a picture, you go, what happened here?
Yeah.
How many years ago?
Yeah.
This was history in the making for our community. And it's very humbling.
Right.
It's very, very humbling.
Yeah.
Very humbling. I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed.
When you think about the history of this region and this part of the country, pre-Erie Canal,
Right.
Revolutionary War, and we can talk about that, you mentioned that before, the abolition movement, Garrett Smith in Peterborough, the women's suffrage movement,
Right.
the Haudenosaunee Nation, and how our democracy, we learned so much from the nation as we created the democracy in this country. There's so much history, and that's scratching the surface. And as I said before, there are lots more opportunities to do markers in these three towns. And I hope that a result of this is some partnership locally here so that the William G. Pomeroy Foundation can do more markers around here to honor and commemorate your history.
Well, I would like that. I mean, now that you've got the ball rolling here,
Yeah.
now I'm coming up with some ideas
Good.
how maybe we can push some things locally.
Excellent.
And I think we can.
Good.
I think we can, because there are a lot of people that have a lot of interest, as I do, and I'd love to get the kids more involved.
Yeah.
Because they need to know too. They need
Yeah.
to know and have that sense of pride in their area, and just need to know what happened here.
Right.
And
History happened here.
It did, a lot of it too. More than I ever would have imagined. Would have imagined. But anyways, we want to go back. You said you wanted to talk a little bit about the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
And you kind of walk us through that a little bit too.
Sure. So we have 6 signature programs, and the New York State program is one of those. We also have partner programs. So let's talk a little bit about some of the partner programs, and we'll start with Patriot Burials. So Patriot Burials is a program where the foundation works with the Sons of the American Revolution in New York State and 9 other states. And there's a single point of contact in each of those states, and lots of ideas are coming through that person to the foundation versus coming directly to the foundation. And that helps us do more quickly, just that little nuance to the model. And so those SAR members, Sons of the American Revolution, are doing research about cemeteries all over New York State and these 9 other states. And when they identify patriots who are buried in those cemeteries and can document it with primary sources, we'll do a marker for that cemetery. And they're beautiful markers. The New York State markers have the outline of a Revolutionary War soldier with the background of New York State behind the soldier. In Tennessee, it's the background of the state of Tennessee. In Pennsylvania, it's the background of the state of Pennsylvania. We've done over 200 of these. And we define patriots more broadly than a soldier who served in the war. It could be a person who provided medical assistance to wounded soldiers. It could be a person who paid taxes, who provided supplies, who provided food to the Continental Army. All those things qualify one to be a patriot. And we are seeing a wave of applications for Patriot Burials as we get close to our 250th celebration in this country. So that goes back to the Revolutionary War. We certainly have markers that predate the Revolution. We've done a partnership program in North Carolina called the North Carolina Civil Rights Trail, which commemorates people, places, and events that happened in the civil rights movement in North Carolina. From integrating swimming pools to lunch counters and so much more. We have a partnership with Rails to Trails, the organization that has reclaimed abandoned railroad lines. There's a lot of history on those railroad lines as you think about the Great Migration North, and we're doing markers with them on their rail lines. Perhaps the largest one was our National Votes for Women Trail. So the 19th Amendment was passed in 1920, and for the 100th anniversary in 2020, we partnered with a women's history organization that did over 220 markers all over the country. There are many in New York, but there are many in many other states. They are beautiful markers. They're purple and gold and white. And they tell the story of the women who worked so hard to gain the right to vote for other women in this country. That's a wonderful partnership that we've done. We have a partnership with the Daughters of the American Revolution. We're working on a lot more really exciting ones. I don't want to give those away
Okay.
until we do the deals,
Yeah,
but
okay.
there's some really exciting things going on as far as potential partnership programs. The one that I wanted to mention is the Lafayette Trail.
Okay.
So General Lafayette came to the United States when he was 19, and he served in the Continental Army, and he became like a son to George Washington. And he was there at Yorktown when the British were defeated, and he was a big part of the effort to win that war. And he risked his life. He contributed a lot of his fortune. He got other Frenchmen to come and fight with him. And I didn't know any of this before I started to work.
Well, I'm learning now,
I
too.
was a history major over at Hamilton. I love history, but I didn't know any of this.
Well, I didn't either, so
Yeah.
don't feel like you're alone there.
Right. And so 50 years after the war, because he was so young when he served, Lafayette was the last surviving major general in the Continental Army. And I think it was President Monroe and Congress invited him over and sponsored a trip 50 years after the Revolution. So 1824, 1825. The election of 1824 was contentious. Who would have guessed we'd have a contentious election in this country? And so Lafayette came back and he went to every existing state. So it was 24 by then. He toured the country. He was in Louisiana, he was in Mississippi, he was in Tennessee. And over 2 years, he traveled the country and stopped and spoke with politicians, widows of soldiers. He met with men that he had served with. And really, over those 2 years, reminded us that we were exceptional. And I say that word carefully. I think that word can be misconstrued. Exceptional doesn't mean that we're better than anyone. What he reminded us was that what we accomplished together was exceptional, and the world had never seen anything like it. And it's an experiment that we continue to work on every day. And this young man, Julian Ishay, is a 31-year-old Frenchman who started a nonprofit called the Lafayette Trail, and we've done 175 markers across the country to commemorate General Lafayette's return to the United States. We did one in Auburn a week from this past Sunday and one in Skaneateles the same day. A lot of people came out for these dedications. They told the story, again, which I didn't know. But at that time, 2,000 people lived in Auburn. When Lafayette came to town, there were 8,000 people there. There were certainly a lot of people from right here who went to Auburn to greet him and thank him and celebrate him. And as Lafayette's going down the street, he recognizes a man 50 years later
Oh, my heavens.
who he had served with in the Revolution and went and greeted him. And when I was in Skaneateles, I gave some remarks at the Masonic Temple.
Mm-hmm.
The Masons were very involved in this. And as the dedication went on, I realized that what Julian Ishay is doing is he's coming back 200 years later and again reminding us of who we are. Mm-hmm. And it's so powerful. And then I made this connection to Bill Pomeroy, which I hadn't made before. So I believe that part of the reason Bill and the foundation fund these markers all over New York and all over the country is to remind people locally how important their history is and how exceptional they can be, and they are, right here in Idaho, in Arizona. And I hadn't connected those dots until a week ago Sunday, but that makes these markers and what we do even more important. And to meet someone like you, Cindy, who gets it, is just wonderful.
It's been a long time coming, let me tell you, a long time coming.
To meet someone who who's willing to invite me onto the program to have this conversation and to join us in doing something that we think is so very important.
Oh, it is very important. It is. We're talking about the growth of the program. Now, this is something I'd heard about, but I'm hearing more and more about it
Yeah.
now. So obviously, you're getting your word out there more
Yeah.
now too.
Right.
That you're growing in,
Yeah.
in knowledge and what you do and who you're helping and who
Yeah.
you're giving grants to.
Yes.
Now, this is part of the big mission.
Yes.
Is to keep expanding
Yes.
historically.
Yeah,
I
thanks.
presume.
Thanks for asking.
Okay.
So I get to work with professional historians. That's very important. So that when someone applies for one of these markers, they're going to be working with a professional historian. We just hired 2 new historians, local folks, Syracuse alumna, and they're now on the team. So we can work with more people to do more applications. So there's a growth in the number of markers we're doing, and there's a growth nationally. So this Pomeroy, William G. Pomeroy Foundation brand is growing nationally. We've replicated the New York State program in every other state, and we call it Hometown Heritage. So it's very similar to New York State, and what we need to say is New York State and Hometown Heritage honor and commemorate history that happened over 100 years ago. So it's real history. It's not current fads, it's not popular culture, and we need to keep that in mind. So to apply for a marker in those 2 programs, it's 100 years or older. And Hometown Heritage replicates the New York State program all over the country. We have a really fun program called Hungry for History, which we do markers for food history. So locally, there's a marker for the salt potato on Onondaga Lake near the Salt Museum.
Right.
It's
Right.
really fun.
Appropriate, yeah.
And there's one in Binghamton for the Speedy. There's one in Maryland for something that's called Smith Island cake. Smith Island's an island in the Chesapeake that has this special cake. Beef on Wick, and all over the country. We've done 20 plus, so we'd love to do more of those. And our new historians are connecting with food historians. I didn't know there was such a thing as a food historian, but they're all over. And so we think we're going to get a lot more Hungry for History markers. We have a folklore program, so think the Headless Horseman, Ichabod Crane,
Right.
John Henry, the Steel Driving Man, locally the 13 Curves down in Onondaga,
Right.
Champy, the Lake Champlain Monster. Those applications are different, but we work with professional folklorists. So it's not, they're legends, but it's not legendary. It's not like Babe Ruth was a legendary baseball player, so he gets a marker. It could be that Babe Ruth came to a fairgrounds in the 20s and purportedly hit a 600-foot home run. That could be folklore.
Nice, but
We do markers for public places on the National Register of Historic Places. So what I would encourage your viewers and you to think about that. They're the easiest to get because you need a letter that says that the location is on the National Register. They can't be private residences or private businesses, but everything else is fair game.
Okay.
And they're the easiest to get because the primary source is your letter that says we're on the National Register of Historic Places. We do transportation markers, so planes and trains, not automobiles yet, but canals, tunnels, airfields, bridges, those kinds of things. And there are history buffs that are very interested in those kinds of things who apply for markers. So National Register, Hometown Heritage, Legends and Lore, Hungry for History, New York State, Transportation. We have 6 signature programs. And we take applications for them sometimes on a rolling basis. Sometimes there are deadlines, but we work with people. We want, as I said before, we want people to get these markers.
Well, I have to tell you that I never knew. This has been a very big learning experience for me because I thought primarily it was what we came here for initially to talk about historical markers, and now we're expanding, which I think is fabulous.
Yeah.
I think it's fabulous. But again, you're always looking for people to send in applications,
Yeah.
to try to get a grant. Please give us your address.
Sure.
Your email, the site address.
Yeah.
So people can
Yeah.
find out more and get more information.
Yeah, Cindy, we're searching for an operations director to kind of run the business
Okay.
side of things. And so if anyone's watching and they have an idea for someone who could come join the foundation, very mission-driven place. It's fun. Like it's fun to do this work.
If you like history,
you feel
and
it,
all
right?
these things, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a great place to work. So if you want more information, it's wgpfoundation.org.
Okay.
And that's how you can find us.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I thank you so much.
Thank
This has
you.
been quite a learning experience for me. And we're going to delve a little bit further because I want to show all of our local signs.
Yeah.
So people know, what is that sign? Well, here's what it means. Here's where it is. Here's the historical significance. So we want to kind of delve into the, 12 to 14 signs in
Yeah,
our area
wonderful.
here. I believe many of them are Pomeroy, because I went back and looked at a lot of
Okay.
them. Many of them are. But again, this is all to help for everybody here to learn about history, local history, national history. I mean, we don't have to limit ourselves
Yeah.
to local here because people travel all the time, and I'm
Yeah.
sure they see these signs.
As your viewers learn about the local signs, next time you
Okay.
have this segment.
Okay.
The last weekend in April is National Historical Marker Weekend. And we encourage people to go out and take care of the signs in their local communities.
Okay.
So they go out and a lot of these signs are by the side of the road in central New York.
They're in pretty rough shape, some of them are.
can
Yeah.
get. And so the weekend, we just celebrated our 5th weekend this past April.
Okay.
Well, it was a day, now it's a weekend. So more students
You're
and
ge-
people who work can get out there. But people go out and clean up the markers. Soap, brushes, clean them up every year. And next year, in 2026, that weekend will take place the last weekend in April. And as people learn about these markers, it would be great if they would think about going out next April.
And cleaning 'em. Yeah.
And maybe through the show you can remind people of that
I
as
will.
we get closer. But this year we had over 2,000 people went out all over the country in over 30 states to clean markers. People care about this.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Well, obviously,
Yeah.
they're going to care more, I
Yeah.
hope, after this. But in any event, I thank you for your time and thank you for the lesson, because I love history too, and I have learned so much. I appreciate
Yeah.
it. I appreciate all that you do. And once people have been educated more on these historical markers, because I got to believe most people see them.
Yes.
They just don't know what they are.
Yes.
And now you know.
Yeah.
And you're going to know more too, because like I said, we're going to do a segment on the local ones here.
Excellent.
But I appreciate all your time.
So good to
Thanks
be
so
with you.
much.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much, Bill.
All right.